Welcome to the Delmarva Almanac. Each week we connect you to the best of Delmarva. I'm your host, Dana Kester McCabe. It has long been debated whether the rules and the creation of the first baseball diamond were by Alexander Doubleday in Cooperstown, New York. Regardless, all over the U.S., baseball leagues sprung up in big cities and little towns alike. It was clear that it was becoming part of the American way of life following the Civil War when the first professional leagues were formed. The appetite for baseball seemed unquenchable, even though these leagues had a lot of problems. They often lasted just a few years and then disbanded to be replaced by new ones. Most were run by volunteers with regular day jobs, and their budgets were always on a shoestring. Here on the Eastern Shore, teams were made up of mostly farm and cannery workers, the two largest industries here at the time. Records show that games were being played in Talbot County in 1866, and that within a year, Easton, St. Michael's, and Trapp had all organized teams. Chestertown had also caught baseball fever by this time. The post-Civil War boom economy, which led to rail lines being completed here on Delmarva, made travel easier for teams to play in a wider circuit of towns. Players were treated like celebrities in every town they visited. They were given parades and special meals in their honor with speeches and music. For overnight trips, they were often hosted in private homes because they couldn't afford to stay in hotels. In the earliest days, even if they were considered professionals, a player considered it high pay if they got $5 a game. Nonetheless, competition to join a team became very stiff. By 1908, the Cambridge Canners had to go through hundreds of applications to fill a 15-slot roster. From the late 1800s on, baseball was an obsession on Delmarva. World War I interrupted the usual summer fun, but once it was over, professional baseball became a serious business. And the Eastern Shore League was first formed in 1922. They managed to stay in business for 6 years with 6 teams, with all 3 states on the peninsula represented. From Maryland, there were the Cambridge Canners, the Crisfield Crabbers, the Pocomoke City Salamanders, and the Salisbury Indians. Delaware had the Laurel Blue Hens, and from Virginia came the Parksley Spuds. June 12th was opening day for the first season. 6,000 people attended the first game, and Delmarva fans felt like they were in baseball heaven. Unfortunately, with emotions running so high, spectators got out of hand during a game between Crisfield and Parksley. They attacked an umpire for a questionable call, sending him to the hospital with a cracked skull. The season was also marred by the practice of bringing in ringers mid-season from outside the area to improve a team's playoff chances. This was banned in the rules the next year. The new regulation and favorable notice from the big leagues led to athletes from other regions applying for regular positions on our local teams. Famed right fielder and Hall of Famer George Selkirk came all the way from Ontario, Canada, to play for the Cambridge Canners in 1927. There are many star players who grew up right here on Delmarva and who deserve a mention in this story, but there are 3 Hall of Famers in particular who stand out. The first is Frank Home Run Baker. He was born and raised in Trapp, Maryland. No matter where he played in the outfield or infield, he never really stood out as an asset for his team. His talent was hitting. He went up to the Major League in 1908 and hit a grand slam the very first time he stepped up to plate. He helped the Philadelphia A's win World Series titles in 1910, 1911, and 1913. Rival Yankees manager Hal Chase said that he was, quote, a dangerous man at all times, unquote. Throughout Frank Baker's baseball career, he was known to be a shy man who never had a bad word for anyone. After retiring from active play, he came back to Trapp to live and to scout area teams for the Philadelphia A's. That's when he found the next standout player in our story. Jimmy Fox got his start right out of high school when he was recruited to play for the Easton Farmers. His father, Del, was well known to baseball fans on Delmarva. He could have gone on to bigger things, but stayed on the Eastern Shore to help his family when his own father died suddenly. Jimmy played catcher for the Dover Senators in 1923. His team lost the local pennant to the Parksley Spuds, but they invited him to join them. In the 1924 playoff season, in a 5-state series, they won the championship with his help. Frank Baker spotted this talented young man and recruited Jimmy to play for the Phillies, where he became one of the greatest first basemen of all time. In 1925, Fox was only 17 when he went to Fort Myers for his first spring training season. He went on to play for the Boston Red Sox and Chicago Cubs. He won 3 MVP awards and was featured on the cover of Time magazine. He earned the nicknames of Sudlersville Slugger and Double X since his name Fox ended with 2 X's. Jimmy generally had a good relationship with his fans. He once visited a young boy who admired him who was in the hospital sick with tuberculosis. This may sound like a pretty standard thing that celebrities do, but in those days TB was a big deal and considered to be very contagious. Jimmy tried to follow in the footsteps of idols like Babe Ruth, but keeping up with their high living got the best of him. Jimmy was never able to handle his liquor or his money. And like so many other giant talents before and after him, he waited too long to hang up his hat. This made it hard for him to find work when he finally did. Not long before his premature death at the age of 56, convinced his fame was no longer of any value, he gave away all his awards and memorabilia. On a somewhat sudden impulse, he gave them to Gil Dunn, a fan who had a small shrine dedicated to him in his Sudlersville pharmacy. This trove is now available for baseball lovers to view at the Sudlersville Train Museum. The town also has a statue of Jimmy, and his fame was apparently valuable to Hollywood. The character that Tom Hanks plays in the film A League of Their Own, about the Women's Baseball League during World War II, is based in part on stories about Jimmy Fox.
Are you crying?
No.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Why don't you leave her alone, Jimmy?
Oh, you zip it, Doris.
Crying may be frowned upon in baseball, but people do get very emotional about this sport. Obsession for the game led most American towns to create and maintain beautiful ball fields for white players and fans. Until the mid-20th century, baseball, like everything else here, was segregated. The black community had to come up with their own ball fields, and because they had less money, these were usually empty lots or what they simply called clean places, with few amenities. The Eastern Shore Negro League was not formally recognized until 1932. Clearly, devotion to the game was just as strong for blacks as it was for whites. And you can't keep real talent down. That brings us to another local Hall of Famer. The story of baseball on Delmarva would not be complete without talking about William Judy Johnson. Judy was born in Snow Hill, Maryland in 1899. At about the age of 10, his family moved to Wilmington, Delaware to find better job opportunities. His father became the athletic director of the Negro Settlement House there. He was a boxing coach, but Judy had a passion for baseball from an early age. He began playing professionally for the Negro League in 1918. He was a power hitter with a consistently high batting average, and he was an excellent third baseman known to approach that position scientifically with, quote, intelligence and grace, unquote. By the 1920s, many white minor league rookies were starting at $150 a week. Black players were still making about $5 a game. So while he was still a player, Judy gladly became a team manager for the extra money. When Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947, Judy had retired from active play and had been coaching in the Negro League for some time. Connie Mack of Phillies fame invited him to scout for the team. Judy is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame and the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame. His home in Marshallton, Delaware is on the National Register of Historic Places. And you can also see a display dedicated to him at the Julia Purnell Museum in his birthplace, Snow Hill. Today, on any given day or evening from spring through early fall, you can catch a live game of baseball here on Delmarva. From boys and girls t-ball to Little League, to high school and college ball, to recreation leagues, to the minor league Delmarva Shorebirds and the Wilmington Blue Hens. And though it's not considered the same game, don't discount baseball's exciting close cousins, slow and fast-pitch softball, which both women and men play. Hitting a ball and running the bases is a part of the fabric of our country. To watch a game on a small field where you can hear the players and coaches talking is very different and, in my opinion, more exciting than watching on TV or in a large stadium. Though some teams may play dirty and umps can make bad calls, it always feels good to root for your home team. But when your team loses, buck up and remember,
There's no crying in baseball!
find out more about Delmarva's baseball heritage by visiting the Eastern Shore Baseball League Museum at Shorebird Stadium in Salisbury. It's open during their regular games. There are also a number of good books on this topic. Find links to these and more on our website, delmarvaalmanac.com/history. Well, that's all for this edition of the Delmarva Almanac. Be sure to follow us on Facebook or Twitter, and next week join us to learn more about our local culture and get connected to our natural wonders. We'd like to thank our community partners, the Friends of Delmarva Public Radio, and our underwriters for their help in bringing this program to you, our audience. If you'd like to become an underwriter for this program, visit delmarvaalmanac.com/support. Our theme music was provided by Brightside Studio. This show has been a Moonshell production. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, may the rhythms and tides of Delmarva bring you good fortune.